Hello everyone! I hope you're ready for another adventure because today Wayne continues to read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Always remember that as we go through these stories and read these amazing adventures, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link to be able to follow along with the words. I think that Madam Owl is going to be excellent to join us for today's adventure. Are you ready to jump in, Madam Owl? Awesome. Madam Owl is all set, so let's jump in. Chapter 10, Halloween. Malfoy couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Harry and Ron were still at Hogwarts the next day, looking tired but perfectly cheerful. Indeed, by the next morning, Harry and Ron thought that meeting the three-headed dog had been an excellent adventure, and they were quite keen to find another one. In the meantime, Harry filled Ron in about what the package seemed to have been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts. And they spent a lot of time wondering what could possibly have been under such heavy protection. It's either really valuable or really dangerous, said Ron. Or both, said Harry. But as they knew for sure about the mysterious object was that it was about 2 inches long, they didn't have much chance on guessing what it was without further clues. Neither Neville nor Hermione showed the slightest interest in what lay underneath the dog in the trapdoor. All Neville cared about was never going near that dog again. Hermione was now refusing to speak to Harry and Ron, but she was such a bossy know-it-all that they saw this as an added bonus. All they really wanted now was getting back at Malfoy, and to their great delight, just such a thing had arrived in the mail a week later. As the owls flooded into the great hall as usual, everyone's attention was caught at once by a long, thin package carried by 6 screech owls. Harry was just as interested as everyone else to see what was in the large parcel, and was amazed when the owl soared down and dropped it right in front of him, knocking his bag onto the floor. They had hardly fluttered out of the way when another owl dropped a letter onto the top of the parcel. Harry ripped open the letter first, which was lucky because it said, "Do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your Nimbus 2000, but don't want everyone knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your morning training session. Professor McGonagall." Harry had difficulty hiding his glee as he handed the note to Ron to read. "A Nimbus 2000, Ron roared enviously. "I've never even touched one." They left the hall wanting to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first class. But halfway across the entrance hall, they found the way upstairs barred by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy seized the package from Harry and felt it. "That's a broomstick," he said, throwing it back to Harry with a mixture of jealousy and spite on his face. "You'll be in for this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed to have them." Ron couldn't resist. "It's not any old broomstick," he said. "It's a Nimbus 2000. What do you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Combat 260? Ron grinned at Harry. "Combats look fashy, but they're not in the same league as a Nimbus." "What would you know about it, Weasley? You couldn't afford half a handle," Malfoy snapped back. "And I suppose you brothers have to save up for a twig by twig." Before Ron could answer, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. "Not arguing, I hope, boys," he squeaked. "Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor," Malfoy said quickly. Yes, that's right," said Professor Broomstick, beaming at Harry. "Professor McGonagall told me all about the special circumstances, Potter. What model is it?" "A Nimbus 2000, sir," said Harry, fighting not to laugh at the horror on Malfoy's face. "And it's really thanks to Malfoy that I've got it," he added. Harry and Ron headed upstairs, smothering their laugh at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. "Well, it's true," Harry chortled as they reached the top of the marble staircase. "If he hadn't stolen Neville's Remember-All, I wouldn't be on the team." "So I suppose you think that's a reward for breaking the rules," came an angry voice just behind them. Hermione was stomping up the stairs, looking disapprovingly at the package in Harry's hand. "I thought you weren't speaking to us," said Harry. "Yes, Don't stop now, said Ron. It's going to do us so much good. Hermione marched away with her nose up in the air. Harry had a lot of trouble keeping his mind on his lessons that day. It kept wandering up to the dormitory where his new broomstick lay lying under his bed, or straying off to the Quidditch field where he'd be learning to play that night. He bolted his dinner that evening without noticing what he was even eating, and then rushed upstairs with Ron to unwrap the Nimbus 2000 at last. Wow, Ron said, as the broomstick rolled into Harry's bedspread. Even Harry, who knew nothing about the different brooms, thought it looked wonderful, sleek and shiny, with a mahogany handle. It had a long tail of neat, stray twigs, Nimbus 2000 written on the gold near the top. As 7 o'clock drew near, Harry left the castle and set off towards dusk towards the Quidditch field. He'd never been inside the stadium before. Hundreds of seats were raised in the stands around the field, so the spectators were high enough to see what was going on. At either end of the field, 3 gold pools with hoops on the end. They reminded Harry of the little plastic sticks Muggle children blew bubbles through, except they were really 50 feet high. Too eager to fly again for wood, Harry mounted his broomstick and kicked off the ground. What a feeling! He swooped up in and out of the goalposts and sped up and down the field. The Nimbus 2000 turned wherever he wanted, at least to touch. Hey, Potter, come down. Oliver Wood had arrived. He was carrying a large wooden crate under his arm. Harry landed next to him. Very nice, said Wood, his eyes glinting. I see what McGonagall meant. You really are natural. I'm just going to teach you the rules this evening. Then you'll be joining team practice 3 times a week. He opened the crate. Inside were 4 different sized balls. Right, said Wood. Now, Quidditch is easy to understand, even if it's not too easy to play. There are 7 players on each side. 3 of them are called chasers. 3 chasers, Harry repeated, as Wood took out a bright ball about the size of a soccer ball. This is what's called a quaffle, said Wood. The chasers throw the quaffle to each other and try to get it through one of the hoops to score a goal. 10 points every time the quaffle goes through one of the hoops. Follow me? The chasers throw the quaffle and put it into the hoops to score, Harry recited. So that's sort of like basketball and broomsticks with 6 hoops, isn't it? What's basketball? Said Wood cautiously. Never mind, said Harry quickly. Now, there's another player on each side who's called the keeper. I'm keeper for Griffin. I'll have to fly around our hoops to keep them from scoring. 3 chasers, 1 keeper, said Harry, who was determined to remember it all. And they play with the quaffle. Okay, got that. What are they for? Harry pointed at the 3 balls left inside the box. I'll show you now, said Wood. Take this. He handed Harry a small club, a bit like a short baseball bat. I'm going to show you what bludgers do, Wood said. These 2 are bludgers. He showed Harry 2 identical balls, jet black and slightly smaller than the red quaffle. Harry noticed that they seemed to be straining to escape the straps holding them inside the box. Stand back, Wood warned. He bent and freed one of the bludgers. At once, the black ball rose in the air and then pelted straight at Harry's face. Harry swung it at the bat to stop it from breaking his nose and sent it zigzagging away. It zoomed around their heads and then shot at Wood, who dived on top of it, managed to pin it to the ground. See, Wood panted, forcing the bludger back into the crate and strapping it down safely. Bludgers rocket around, trying to knock players off their brooms. That's why you have 2 beaters on the team. The Weasley twins are ours. It's their job to protect their side from the bludgers and try to knock them toward the other team. So you think you've got all that? 3 chasers try to score with the quaffle. The keeper guards the posts. The beaters keep the bludgers away from their team, Harry reeled off. Very good, said Wood. Have the bludgers ever killed anyone? Harry asked, hoping not to sound offhand. Never at Hogwarts. We've had a couple of broken jaws. Nothing worse than that. Now the last member of the team is a seeker. That's you. And don't you have to worry about the quaffle or the bludgers. Unless they crack your head open. Don't worry. The Weasleys are more than a match for the bludgers. I mean, they're like a pair of human bludgers themselves. Wood reached into the crate and took out the 4th and last ball. Compared to the quaffle and the bludgers, it was tiny. about the size of a large walnut. It was gold and had bright, silver fluttering wings. "This," said Wood, "is the golden snitch, and it's the most important ball of the lot. It's very hard to catch because it's so fast and difficult to see. It's the seeker's job to catch it. You've got to weave in and out of the beaters and chasers and bludgers and quaffle to get it in before the other team's seeker, because whichever seeker catches the snitch wins his extra team an extra 150 points, so they nearly always win. That's why seekers get fouled so much. A game of Quidditch only ends when the snitch is caught, so it can go on for ages. I think the record is 3 months. They had to keep bringing on substitutes so the players could get some sleep." Well, that's it. Any questions? Harry shook his head. He understood what he had to do all right. It was doing it that was going to be the problem. "We won't practice with the snitch yet," said Wood, carefully shutting it back inside its crate. "It's too dark. We might lose it. Let's try to get you out of these." He pulled out a bag of ordinary golf balls out of his pocket, and a few minutes later, he and Harry were up in the air, Wood throwing the golf balls as hard as he could in every direction for Harry to catch. Harry didn't miss a single one, and Wood was delighted. After half an hour, night had really fallen, and they couldn't carry on. "That Quidditch Cup have our name on it this year," said Wood happily, as they trudged up back towards the castle. "I wouldn't be surprised if you turn out better than Charlie Weasley. He could have played for England if gone off chasing dragons." Perhaps it was because he was now busy, what with Quidditch, practicing 3 hours a week and homework, but Harry could hardly believe it when he realized he'd already been at Hogwarts 2 months. The castle felt more like home than Privet Drive ever did. His lessons, too, were becoming more and more interesting now that he had mastered the basics. On Halloween, morning broke to the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even Professor Flitwick announced in Charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something they had been dying to try ever since he'd seen them make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put the class into pairs to practice. Harry's partner was Seamus Finnegan, which was a relief because Neville was trying to catch his eye. Ron, however, somehow working with Hermione Granger. It was hard to tell whether Ron or Hermione was angrier about this. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the day Harry's broomstick had arrived. "Now, don't forget the nice wrist movement we've been practicing," squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched on top of his pile of books. "Swish and flick. Remember? Swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important too. Never forget Wizard Buffalo, who said it S instead of F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest." It was very difficult. Harry and Seamus swished and flicked, but the feather they were supposed to be sending skyward just lay on the desktop. Seamus was so impatient that he prodded it with his wand and set it on fire to it. Harry had put it out with his hat. Ron, at the next table, wasn't having much more luck. "Wingardium Leviosa," he shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. "You're saying it wrong," Harry heard Hermione snap. "It's Wingardium Leviosa. You're making Gar sound nice and long." "You do it then," he said, "if you're so clever," Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up her sleeve of her gown, flicked her wand, and said, "Wingardium Leviosa." The feather rose off the desk and hovered for about 4 feet above their heads. Well done," cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. "Everyone see here. Miss Granger has done it." Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of the class. "It's no wonder no one can stand her," he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded door. "She's a nightmare, honestly." Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face. He started to see that she was shedding tears. "I think she heard you." "So?" said Ron. He had looked a bit uncomfortable. "She must have noticed she's got no friends." Hermione didn't turn up for the Nest class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Prati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked still more awkward at this, but A moment later, they had entered the great hall, where the Halloween decorations put Hermione out of their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered around the walls, ceilings, while thousands more swooped over the tables in low black clouds, making the candles and little pumpkins stutter. The feast up suddenly on the golden plates, as it had at the start of the banquet. Harry was helping himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into his hall, his turban askew and terror in his face. Everyone stared as he reached Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, "Troll! Troll in the dungeon!" "Thought you ought to know." He sank to the floor in a dead faint. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. "Prefects," he rumbled, "lead your houses back to your dormitories immediately." Percy was in his element. "Follow me. Stick together, first years. No need to fear the troll if you follow my orders. Stay close behind me now. Make way. First year's coming through. Excuse me, I'm a prefect." "How would a troll get in?" Harry asked as they climbed up the stairs. "Don't ask me. They're supposed to be really stupid," said Ron. "Maybe Peeves let it in as a Halloween joke." They passed different groups of people hurrying in different directions. As they jostled their way through a crowd of confused Hufflepuffs, Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. "I just thought, Hermione, what about her? She doesn't know about the troll." Ron bit his lip. "Oh, right," he snapped. "But Percy better not see us." Ducking down, they joined the Hufflepuffs going the other way, slipped down the deserted corridor, and hurried off to the girls' bathroom. They had just turned the corner when they heard quick footsteps behind them. "Percy," hissed Ron, pulling Harry behind a large stone. Peering around it, however, they saw not Percy, but Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. "What's he doing?" Harry whispered. "Why isn't he down in the dungeons with the rest of the teachers?" "Search me." Quietly as possible, they crept along the corridor after Snape's fading footsteps. "He's heading to the 3rd floor," Harry said, but Ron held up his hand. "Can you smell something?" Harry sniffed and a foul stench reached his nostrils. A mixture of old socks and the kind of public toilet one seems to clean. And then they heard it, a low grunting, and then the shuffling footfalls of gigantic feet. Ron pointed at the end of the passage to the left. Something was moving toward them. They shrank into the shadows and watched it emerge into a patch of moonlight. It was a horrible sight. 12 feet tall. Its skin was dull, granite gray, with a great lubby body like a boulder, with small, bald head perched on top like a coconut. It had short, thick legs as tree trunks with flat, horny feet. The smell coming from it was incredible. It was holding a huge wooden club which it dragged along the floor because its arms were so long. The troll stopped next to the doorway and peered inside. It wiggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slowly slouched into the room. "The key's in the lock," Harry muttered. "We could lock it in." "Good idea," said Ron nervously. They edged toward the door, mouths dry, praying the troll wasn't going to come out of it. In one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key and lock it. Yes! Flushed with their victory, they started to run back the passageway, but they heard something that made their hearts stop. A high-pitched scream, and it was coming from the chamber they just chained up. "Oh no," said Ron, as pale as the Bloody Baron. "It's the girls' bathroom," Harry gasped. "Hermione," they said. It was the last thing they wanted to do, but what choice did they have? Wheeling around, they sprinted back in the door and turned the key, fumbling in their panic. Harry pulled the door open, and they ran inside. Hermione was shrinking against the opposite wall, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking the sinks off the walls as it went. "Confuse it," Harry said desperately to Ron, and seizing a tap, he threw it as hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione. It lumbered around, blinking stupidly, to see what had made its noise. Its mean little eyes saw Harry. It hesitated, then made its way for him instead, lifting its club as it went. "Oi, Pea-Brain!" yelled Ron from the other side of the chamber, and threw a metal pipe at it. The troll didn't even seem to notice the pipe hitting its shoulders, but when it heard the yell, it paused again, turning its ugly snout towards Ron instead, giving Harry time to run around it. "Come on, run, run!" he yelled at Hermione, trying to pull her toward the door, but she wouldn't move. She was flat against the wall, her mouth open with terror. The shouting and echoes seemed to be driving the troll berserk. It roared again toward Ron, who was the nearest and had no way to escape. Harry then did something that was both brave and very stupid. He took a great running leap and managed to fasten his arm around the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging on there, but even a troll will notice if you stick a long bit of wood up its nose. And Harry's wand had still been in his hand when he jumped. It had gone straight up the troll's nostrils. Howling in pain, the troll twisted and wailed its club, with Harry clinging on for dear life. Any second, the troll was going to rip them off or catch them with a terrible blow with its club. Hermione had sunk to the floor with fright. Ron pulled out his wand. Not knowing what he was going to do, he heard himself cry out the last spell that came to his mind. Wingardium Leviosa! The club flew suddenly out of the troll's hand, rose high up into the air, turned slowly over, and dropped with a sickening crack onto its owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot and then fell flat on its face with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet. He was shaky and out of breath. Ron was standing there with his wand still raised, staring at what he had done. It was Hermione who spoke first. Is it dead? I don't know, said Harry. I think it's been knocked out. He bent down and pulled its wand out of his nostrils. It was covered in what looked like lumpy gray glue. Ugh, troll boogers. He wiped it on the troll's trousers. A sudden slamming and loud footsteps made the three of them look up. They hadn't realized what a racket they had been making, but of course, someone downstairs must have noticed the crashes and troll's roars. A moment later, Professor McGonagall had come bursting into the room, closely followed by Snape with Quirrell bringing up the rear. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat quickly down on a toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll. Professor McGonagall was looking at Ron and Harry. Harry had never seen her so angry. Her lips were white. Hopes of winning 50 points for Gryffindor quickly faded from Harry's mind. What on earth were you thinking, said Professor McGonagall, with a cold fury in her voice. Harry looked at Ron, who was still standing with his wand in the air. You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory? Snape gave Harry a swift, piercing look. Harry looked at the floor. He wished Ron would put the wand down. Then a small voice came out of this. Please, Professor McGonagall. They were looking for me. Miss Granger? Hermione managed to get to her feet at last. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with him on my own. You know, because I've read so much about them. Ron dropped his wand. Hermione Granger telling downright a lie to a teacher? If they hadn't found me, I'd be dead right now. Harry stuck his wand up its nose, and Ron knocked it out with its own club. They didn't have time to come and fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived. Harry and Ron tried to look as though this story wasn't new to them. Well, in that case, said Professor McGonagall, staring at the three of them. Miss Granger, you foolish girl. How could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? Hermione hung her head. Harry was speechless. Hermione was the last person to do anything against the rules, and here she was pretending she had to get them out of trouble. It was as if Snape had started handing out sweets. Miss Granger, 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this, said Professor McGonagall. I am very disappointed in you. If you were hurt at all, you'd get out of Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing their feasts in their houses. Hermione left. Professor McGonagall turned to Ron and Harry. Well, I will say you were lucky, but not many first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll. You will each win Gryffindor 5 points. Professor Dumbledore will be informed of this. You may go. They hurried out of the chamber and didn't speak at all until they climbed the 2 floors. It was a relief to be away from the smell of the troll, quite apart from anything else. We should have gotten more than 10 points. Ron grumbled. 5, you mean, once she's taken off Hermione. Could have her to get us out of trouble like that, Ron admitted. Mind you, we did save her. She might not have needed saving if we hadn't locked her in with the thing, Harry reminded her. They had reached the portrait of the fat lady. Pig snout they had entered. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food they had been sent up with. Hermione, however, stood alone by the door waiting for them. There was a very embarrassed pause. Then, none of them looking at each other, they all said thanks and hurried off to get their plates. But from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. Oh my goodness, that was an amazing adventure. Thankfully, Hermione Granger is safe. What did you think about the story? I like that part too. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next adventure. And we'll see you on the next adventure here with Wayne Reads. Thank you for joining us. We can't wait to see you for the next story. Bye-bye.